Welcome to a real cult classic where we talk about, well, your favorite cult classics, a little bit of pop culture, a smattering of old Hollywood gossip with a side of scandal and intrigue. I'm your esteemed cult leader, Megs from the Cult of Megs, and this is my friend, your friend, cult elder, Auntie Amy. Amy, say hi to the cult.
Hey, everybody.
It's still January and we're over it, so viewer beware.
You're in for two very annoyed and tired cult leaders.
That's for sure. So, given the events of this week, which we won't necessarily get into, I said to Amy, I've been thinking a lot about things that have been banned, like books, and I thought that maybe we should talk about them, given
You
all of the
did.
other things that have were banned this week, like TikTok and such, albeit briefly.
Very briefly. And yeah, in a very shady way. So, yeah, Megan brought up the idea of doing a little podcast about banned books. And one of the titles that it was impactful for me that I saw on this list was Mouse, which is a graphic novel by American cartoonist, editor, and comics advocate Art Spiegelman. Now, book one of Spiegelman's graphic novel, Mouse, A Survivor's Tale, was published by Pantheon Books in 1986. The second volume was published in 1991, and in 1992, it won the Pulitzer Prize. Now, my husband actually gifted me this series when we first started dating, and I think it's probably my favorite gift that he has ever given me because it illuminated to me how well he knew me. Like this to me is such an astonishing graphic novel, um, and sort of combines everything that I really cherish: art, artistic integrity, great storytelling, harrowing storytelling, and history. Um, and actually, when I visited my now husband for the first time in Vancouver, he took me to the Vancouver Art Gallery to see the Art Spiegelman exhibit, which was called Comics, a retrospective of comics, graphics, and scraps in 2013. It was wonderful. So, for those of you who haven't read it, Mouse presents two narratives: the story of Spiegelman's father, Wladek Spiegelman, a Polish Jew who survived the Holocaust and immigrated to the United States in 1951 with his wife Anya, also a survivor, and their toddler Art, and the story of the cartoonist's son as an adult soliciting his father's testimony. Now, also for reference, the book portrays Jewish people as mice and Nazis as cats. Now, Mouse is taught in high school, college, and graduate school in Canada and the US. It is also taught to many middle school students, which was threatened on January 10th, 2022, when Mouse was banned from an eighth grade English language arts curriculum by the McMinn County, Tennessee School Board. The reason? Well, according to minutes from a board meeting, it was due to inappropriate language and an illustration of a nude woman. I think it's important to note that the nude woman they're referencing was a drawing of Spiegelman's dead mother, represented again by a mouse. And I think I read that Spiegelman was particularly offended by that classification of like a nude woman in reference to that. And I will say, though, that a positive outcome of the controversial Tennessee School Board decision was that it brought worldwide attention to Mouse, and book sales actually increased. So positive. Now, this wasn't the first time Mouse faced a ban. Russia pulled the graphic novel from bookstores in 2015 over the swastika depicted prominently on its cover because the country was trying to eliminate depictions of the symbol as it commemorated the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. And again, yes, the symbol is there, but this is not a pro-Hitler book or graphic novel. It's an autobiographical tale, and it's documenting the Holocaust, and in particular through the lens of a son and him trying to rectify this sort of, I guess, troubled relationship that he has with his father, which is really about the trauma the father experienced during the Holocaust and how that trickled down and affected their relationship. Anyway, To speak to Mouse's importance in an educational setting, the Holocaust Memorial Museum said in a series of tweets, again, tweets 2022, I think this was before he shall not be named, bought it and turned it to X. Mouse has played a vital role in educating about the Holocaust through sharing detailed and personal experiences of victims and survivors. Teaching about the Holocaust using books like Mouse can inspire students to think critically about the past and their own roles and responsibilities today. And, I think we should be looking to history now as a North Star as we all navigate troubling trends of global fascism and very obvious hand and arm gestures on a world stage that are being justified as a Roman salute or my heart goes out to you, whatever the hell that means. Um, it's like they say history does not repeat itself, but it does echo. And so I really encourage anyone to pick up Mouse and read it, especially if you are a fan of graphic novels. Spiegelman is a famous cartoonist, and I think it's just a really brilliant, like the mouse and the cat um draw like I just think it's a very beautiful, clever, and harrowing work, and it deserves to be seen. Now, the next book I'm going to be talking about, and this is like, I don't know anyone who doesn't know or recognize this title, To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, published in 1960, Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird is a Pulitzer Prize winning American classic that was also adapted into a film starring Gregory Peck, who won the Academy Award for his performance as Atticus Finch. Now, based loosely on Lee's own childhood experiences, the novel takes place in the Deep South during the Great Depression. The story is narrated by Scout Finch, a young girl whose father, Atticus Finch, is a morally upstanding lawyer. When Atticus defends Tom Robinson, an African American man falsely accused of raping a white woman, the trial exposes the deep racial prejudices and injustices of the community. To Kill a Mockingbird is one of the most frequently challenged books in the US due to its themes of rape and use of profanity and racial slurs. In 2017, the novel was removed from eighth grade classrooms in Biloxi, Mississippi, due to a complaint from a parent citing the use of the N word. After protests from free speech advocates, the novel was re added to the list of optional readings. However, parental permission was required to read it. The second case occurred in 2018 at schools in Duluth, Minnesota, where copies of both To Kill a Mockingbird and Adventures of Huckleberry Finn were removed from the classroom. So, some other examples in 2022, a school district in Seattle voted unanimously to remove the book as required reading for grade 9 students. Which would still, though, allow teachers to choose whether to teach the classic novel. And then another example in Burbank, California, same deal. And in Canada, a school district in Nova Scotia moved to ban To Kill a Mockingbird along with In the Heat of the Night over objections to the depictions of Black people. However, the school board rejected the request. And I found a Vancouver Sun article published on February 29th, 2024, reported that the Surrey School District quietly decided to remove To Kill a Mockingbird from the list of recommended reading for students grade 10 and older. And a spokesperson from the school district did say that they aren't banning the books from classrooms or libraries, but they're no longer including them as part of the curriculum. And the same spokesperson was quoted as saying, "We did a comprehensive review of these resources that determined that the merits of these novels do not outweigh the potential trauma and harm they may cause to some students." And I think that's pretty interesting to have this person be able to weigh in on the merit of Harper Lee's writing. What a hack. The article goes on to say, while anti-racist in message, To Kill a Mockingbird is a book about race written by a white person with a white protagonist. Critics say books by non-Black authors that contain racist slurs are no longer appropriate, while others argue it's a modern classic that is still relevant as a way to discuss racial issues with older high school students. It's almost like you can teach context and actually incorporate the very challenge of a book of this nature written by a white woman in 1960 and have it be part of the discussion as opposed to erasing literature. But what do I know?
I mean,
So
I was educated in the Surrey School District, and we had To Kill a Mockingbird in our curriculum. And I think I turned out great.
you did.
Thanks.
And this is why it's shocking that in 2024 this is, you know, back up for discussion. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember, so in 2018, this is relevant now. In 2018, my husband and I went to New York and we spent a fortune on tickets to Aaron Sorkin's adaptation of To Kill a Mockingbird on Broadway starring Jeff Daniels. I love Jeff Daniels. Now, the conversation about banning this book was pretty hot at that time, as well as the question of how Sorkin was going to adapt and contemporize this classic work for a modern audience. And again, Aaron Sorkin is a white man. Now, I remember this very, very clearly because in and around the time we were really excited to go because I wanted to know how he was going to handle this adaptation, right? A Vulture article that was penned by Aaron Sorkin, who wrote about his experience adapting the play, because he went through a lot of challenges, said, and this is interesting, there are only two significant African American characters in the story, Calpurnia the maid and Tom Robinson the accused. In a tale about racial injustice, neither of them has anything to say on the matter. Tom begs for his life, and Cal bakes crackling bread. It's the kind of thing that would have gone unnoticed in 1960, but in 2018, using Black characters only as atmosphere is as noticeable as it is wrong. Also, in this instance, a wasted opportunity. Does that mean all copies of the novel should be recalled and edited like a Wikipedia entry? Of course not, but neither could I pretend I was writing the play in 1960. And I think therein lies the heart of what I think Aaron Sorkin did so successfully in this adaptation. Just gentle, thoughtful moves in this regard. He took advantage of the fact that Atticus is a highly moralistic, forward thinking character, and he utilized the private space he and Calpurnia held together to craft her responses to the events and the world around her. And it was really beautiful. Like these were not big moves. Like he stayed really true to the classic I found, but he was able to just add that nuance and that depth to that character that we didn't have the privilege of experiencing before because of the time it was written, right? And I think this is I always talk about in writing in particular in creative spaces, private versus public, how characters speak to each other and themselves in private can be very different than they speak to others and themselves in a public space. And so that was a big lesson to me in the way that he navigated that. And it was a success. I think it was nominated for like 9 Tonys. And I know I'm saying Jeff Daniels because I'm obsessed with him, but Calpurnia was played by Samuel Jackson's wife. And I'm gonna get her name because I don't like the old wife um the old wife trope of just not recognizing their name and identity because she is a beast and has a incredible history of performance on Broadway and just acting in general. But her name is Latanya Richardson Jackson, and she was wonderful. So yeah, To Kill a Mockingbird to me, it's one of those ongoing conversations. I just truly believe, and I don't know how you feel about this, I just think we can give context to things without taking them out of the curriculum. Obviously, if there's a book like Mein Kampf, I don't know why that would be useful to anyone. But this is different and I think really helpful for students to learn about things that were written, the topics that were written about, the way that they were handled, the language that was used. Otherwise, what are we doing? It's erasure.
It is. And it's the fact that it is fundamental, again, in like you said, in teaching context and understanding the context of time. I find that people of a certain generation, of newer generations, don't understand context. They don't understand that you can watch like Felicity that uses words that we don't use anymore and understand that during that time it was acceptable. It doesn't make it right, but it was acceptable during that time. And you can't get all hot under the collar for something that happened in the 90s. You just have to be like, okay, that's what happened, and we're just going to move forward and do better.
Yeah.
And erasing it doesn't help anything because, like you said, history doesn't repeat, it echoes. But if you shut the door on it, you're never going to hear the echo, and then you are failed to repeat it again. So I think
Yeah.
that it's just it's you can't bury your head in the sand and pretend it didn't happen. It also offers perspective on the fact that we are not that far away from those periods in history. We are not that far away from a time when our own mothers couldn't get credit cards on their own. And when they could get a credit card, they couldn't get one without their husband's name on it. Like, we need
Yeah.
to identify that we haven't come that far and stop being naive to the fact that we're not safe.
Exactly. Like we're talking about this book was written in 1960 and Trump just revoked a bill that was passed in 1965.
Mm-hmm.
Like this idea that we're
It's
not
been long enough.
susceptible.
It's
Like,
okay. Like,
yeah,
everything,
no,
we can move backward, and we're proving it right now. So if you
no.
aren't taking our future leaders who are sitting in a classroom, who are open-minded and who are vulnerable and who need direction and understanding of nuance and context and our history and how vile our history has been to the other,
Hmm.
even though, we with our pale complexion are not globally the default in Western society, we have othered so many people. They have to learn how to protect the other and protect people who aren't seen as the default, and during a time when they are more vulnerable to that, and have the empathy and the viewpoint to know how to support it.
Well, and this is, we were just talking about like the example of that really messed up, disgusting, problematic gesture, physical
Mm-hmm.
gesture that Elon Musk did, and the gaslighting and the
Mm-hmm.
erasing of said gesture as if we didn't all see it with our own eyes, right? Like the Orwellian quality of that, like just that we're being made to believe, well, we're not stupid and we won't let that happen, but that it's that we didn't see it. Like that's what I mean. And also I will say, in protecting people's very, very real and important feelings about language that can be triggering and hurtful, even within the context, there's a way to teach it too. You can
Mm-hmm.
also choose to omit those words when you're discussing them. You can
Mm-hmm.
like have subwords or talk and then actually talk about the history of those words and
Mm-hmm.
talk about language in a meaningful way and acknowledge it. I think that's the
And the
big
fact that that's
thing.
the power that language has, and that we need to have
Yes.
respect for that power.
Yes, exactly.
Because I think that the same generation that needs to learn these things and learn context and nuance, they have a tendency to use language in a way that they shouldn't be, and using it in a way that diminishes the power of it by calling people certain things or accusing people of certain things that just don't align with what they actually are. And that just makes it dilutes it dilutes the I'm sorry, Amy's having a coughing attack, and I can see her, but you can't.
At least tell me that I have some sort of lower register Kathleen Turner thing
You
going
do,
on.
it's
Like,
very husky.
ugh, like
If
that
1
I'll
800
take, but
numbers were still a thing, I think you could moonlight,
oh my gosh. See, that's a career I could have.
right? Just sit on your couch
Yeah.
with your dogs.
Sorry, folks. I'm getting over, I feel like I'm always sick apparently, because last I think we also had to move a deadline on one of these podcasts because we were both sick at that
We were
time,
both
but
sick. It's
I
that
don't know
time
what's
of
going
year.
on.
I was gonna say that I hopped on that trend that oh, you're so funny, thanks,
Oh
but I have a dead
yeah.
dad. But I
Yeah.
did, and I have a multitude of traumatic things that have made me funny, but one of them was when my sixth grade teacher called me a Nazi in front of my entire class. And I wrote the word, but I used an asterisk for the A. And within 10 minutes, my views were being throttled on the app. So I pulled it down, I privated it, and everything went back to normal. So
Whoa.
there you go on that one.
But hold on. Why did your teacher call you that?
He called me that because we were doing a World War II unit. My teacher was from the Netherlands. He was Dutch. Like, that's where he was born and came from. And he was teaching us about Auschwitz, and he
Mhm.
had pulled out all these books and had put them on the ledge of the chalkboard, and they were of like the ovens. Very traumatic to be
Oh my
showing to a group of
gosh.
12-year-olds. And there was another girl in my class who had a German last name, just so people know I have a German last name. And I'm sitting in the class and he's telling us about this, and all of a sudden he looks right at me and says, "This is what your people did to my people." And I looked around the room and I was confused, and I looked back at him. He was still staring at me, and I was like, "Me?" And he was like, "Yes." And I was like, "But I'm Canadian." My family's Canadian. And he was like, "This is what your people did to my people." So I had to sit in this room with this loser for the entire afternoon, knowing that like my great grandparents left Germany for Canada. They left everything that they knew to come to Canada for a better life, and that their children fought in World War II for Canada so that this moron could then be free to immigrate to Canada and be really rude to their great granddaughter. And I went home and I managed to keep it together. I walked inside the house and I looked at my very Canadian mother, whose mother joined the Canadian Army in World War II and whose father joined the Canadian Navy in World War II. And I was like, my teacher like implied that we were Nazis, and she lost her mind. And I was
Oh
crying.
yeah.
I couldn't stop crying because
Oh, of
it was
course. How
so
awful.
disrespectful to my family's legacy, my memory, such a disgusting thing to be accused of, especially when your family like 3 out of 4 of my grandparents fought for Canada. And she called the principal. Principal wasn't pleased, but he never had to apologize to me or anything. And then that gave license to other kids to call me it, thinking it was funny. And the other girl in my class who had a German last name, nobody said it to her. And then at the end of the year, she handed him a 4 pack of German beer, and he said, "Oh, thanks. This is my favorite." So, yes, my people did that to his people, but he could still enjoy our beer.
That is really crazy to say
Yeah.
that to a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And
It
he
was
was
insane.
serious, like
Oh, he was dead serious.
what
He
the
also
heck?
was married and was having an affair with our grade five, like the grade five teacher next door, who happened to be my husband's teacher.
Oh
And so they
no.
kept opening up the like foldable walls so that we would
Hmm.
have classes together, because they were like mucking around, and it was the worst kept secret in our school. All the parents knew.
Oh my gosh.
And
Okay.
he was
Well,
just a menace.
wow.
But at
Wow.
12, I knew that was a horrific thing to be
Hmm.
accused of,
Of course.
and felt the need to fight against it
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
because it's
No, that's
horrific.
not. See that we're just talking about how you sort of take on these themes and these books and this history in classrooms. That's not how you do it. Um, wow. Okay. I'm sorry you experienced that.
Thanks.
On that note, I know you've got some books.
I do. I was looking, actually, I was interested in seeing the officially banned books in Canada, which is comfortingly enough significantly shorter than that of the US, which is nice.
For now.
One of them was Lady Chatterley's Lover, which was published by D.H. Lawrence, and it's about Constance Reed, whose baronet husband, Sir Clifford Chatterley, is paralyzed from the waist down due to an injury from the Great War. So she hits it with their gamekeeper, Oliver Mallours. Now, the novel deals with the class issue, since Constance is so high to do and Oliver is a blue collar gamekeeper, but it also explores the idea that love requires both emotional and physical connections, as Constance feels a deeper connection to Oliver than she does with her husband, who can only offer her an emotional connection. Now, D.H. Lawrence had initially had difficulty securing publication of the novel in its unexpurgated, this word is so absurd, unexpurgated form, because of the unedited content. So he initially published it privately in England for his subscribers. There was like 2,000 copies. But then in 1960, Penguin published the unexpurgated versions, which led them to be taken to court under the new Obscene Publications Act of 1959. If a publisher could prove that the content held literary merit, that it wasn't utilized just to be obscene, then they could evade the law. But they really didn't like the use of the F word or the "see you next Tuesday" word. Now, in this instance, Penguin won a not guilty verdict, and in an act of pettiness that I greatly respect, put this dedication in the second edition run. For having published this book, Penguin Books was prosecuted under the Obscene Publications Act 1959 at the Old Bailey in London from 20 October to 2 November 1960. This edition is therefore dedicated to the 12 jurors, 3 women and 9 men, who returned a verdict of not guilty and thus made D.H. Lawrence's last novel available for the first time to the public in the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, in Canada, obviously, we are a member of the Commonwealth, unexpurgated copies had been imported from the UK. On November 5th, 1959, police seized the novels from Montreal newsstands. The case went to the Quebec Superior Court and was defeated on April 12, 1960. Censorship was alive and well under the Maple Leaf. 2 years later, lawyer, poet, Rhodes Scholar, and McGill professor F.R. Scott appeared before the Supreme Court of Canada to appeal the ruling and defend the novel. This time he won, and on March 15th, 1962, the court ruled that it was not an obscene publication. Hear, hear.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I've only seen the Netflix um adaptation of this book. I have not read it. And it's pretty spicy.
Mm-hmm.
So is this the obscene, like obscenity they're talking about? Is the depictions of
Anything
sex?
sexual, any language that they thought was perverse or obscene, like was literally put into the criminal code in Canada. And that was the majority of the books that were banned fell under this obscenity law
Oh
of
my God,
anything that they deemed to be perverse.
imagine Penelope Douglas in that
Oh, yeah.
time.
50 Shades of Grey.
No, I'm just thinking about like book talk currently and how it would fare in the banning. I mean, all jokes aside, I know that they're under threat as well in the States.
Well, what isn't these
You know.
days?
But yeah, I guess I don't hear a lot of people talking about that book, and I want to know now if it like stacks up. I mean, there's a lot of heavy romance readers, and based on what I've seen of the adaptation, there might be a good little book to pick up.
Maybe it might have to be the cult book club. We read Lady Chatterley's Lover because I've read some D.H. Lawrence, but I haven't read that one.
Maybe we should.
To do it. Um, the other book that I was interested in because I have this on my shelf, I've never read it. I should read it. But it's a very thick book, and well, Amy is a fan of a thick book. I am not. I don't have the patience, but we'll have to change that. The Naked and the Dead was another one that fell to the ruling of obscenity. Norman Mailer's 1948 novel takes place during World War II and is on the Modern Library's list of the 100 best English language novels of the 20th century. Upon its release, it sat on the New York Times bestseller list for 62 weeks. But in 1949, the book was banned in Australia and Canada for language, even though Norman replaced every use of the F word with the word fug at the behest of his publisher. I think the book is like 857 pages, and he went through every single one and he replaced it. In Canada, the Minister of National Revenue banned it because he thought the book was disgusting. The kicker is he didn't read it. So that's cute. The ban was lifted later that year after Maclean's wrote an expose on censorship in Canada. Now, the banning of the naked and the dead was actually mentioned in John Green's 2006 novel, An Abundance of Catherines, where the book's main protagonist, Colin Singleton, mentions that no one would buy The Naked and the Dead because it contains even more F-bombs than it does regular bombs. So Norman Mailer, as a kind of fug you to the publisher, went through his 872-page book and changed every last F word to fug, which is ironic considering that Green's 2005 novel, Looking for Alaska, is one of the most banned books in America. Looking for Alaska follows Miles Halter to prep school in Florida, where he meets young Alaska Young. Young Alaska Young. Megan. Miles ends up falling for Alaska, but she just wants to remain friends because she has a boyfriend. Alaska ends up passing away tragically, and there are many discussions around death and grief. The book was banned repeatedly for being explicit. There are like two detailed sexual scenes and some F bombs, as well as LGBT themes. Oh my goodness, clutch your pearls. John's own former school banned the book to add insult to injury. John has fought back against the censorship, saying it's a really challenging time for the First Amendment. What's so upsetting to me is that we have professionals who we have trained and who we pay to decide how to teach and how to curate a collection in a library. And those people are called teachers and librarians. It's fine if there's parental pushback, but the idea that parents should have total control of what other kids read is very alarming to me. Regardless, Looking for Alaska was made into a mini series in 2019, but John still deals with his books being reclassified and moved from the teen section to the adult section. The Fault in Our Stars was one of them, which had John speaking out against the Indiana library that made the decision, saying, "This is ludicrous. It is about teenagers, and I wrote it for teenagers. Teenagers are not harmed by reading The Fault in Our Stars." Now, Amy, I remember talking to you about this, about Rainbow Rowell's Fangirl, because I was finding it in both the adult and teen sections at our local bookstores. Like the
Mm-hmm.
booksellers couldn't figure out where it fit. If I could talk properly. But I find that with a lot of YA these days. I enjoy reading it because the themes do feel more mature than they did back when we were younger. But considering that the age range for YA is 12 to 18, you really are relying on subjectivity to determine what is suitable for such a large age range. What is appropriate for an 18-year-old is definitely not appropriate for a 12-year-old, and forcing YA novels to navigate such a large chasm in age is just as large of an ask, if you ask me.
Well, and the idea that kids are not privy to any of the things that are discussed in these books
Mm-hmm.
and through the internet and real life is actually astonishing to me that there's like that misconception. And when you're putting those themes in the hands of craftspeople, people who have um, experience in literary worlds and are able to turn these themes and make them poignant and like I just go, what better teachers, what better kind of world, like I just go, why wouldn't you want your kid to have a book that explores things in a safe environment? Like again, if you have an open um relationship of communication, you're able to sort of like talk about it. If I was so look, if I was a parent and my kid wanted to read a book within that like huge age gap range thing, and I wasn't entirely sure, I would read the book.
Mm-hmm.
I would read it regardless so that I could talk to my kid about it. I would probably secretly read it so that I would be, also able to engage if they wanted to engage with me. I think that's really important.
But I think
It's
that's a
crazy to me because I saw the mini series. I like
mhm.
what about that was so crazy that it's the most banned book?
Right? It's nuts. But I think it's the fact like there's a lot of booksellers online who are begging parents, like just because a book is popular on TikTok and your kid is asking you for it, please don't just go out and blindly buy it and
No,
give
of
it to them. They are
course.
buying their kids Penelope Douglas and handing it over. And then when they find out what's in it, they're getting mad at the bookseller. But you are the parent. You are
No,
in
that's
charge of
ridiculous.
understanding what you're buying for your kid and what your kid is asking you for. It's just
I
the
I told
laziness.
you, it's those freaking covers, those Hannah Grace
Mm-hmm.
covers, the like
The
the
cartoony, comic
yes,
booky. Yeah,
people are
even the
fools.
done and dusted Rebel Blue Ranch
Oh,
series that I love, those look harmless. They're not. They're not
no.
harmless,
I bought those specifically for the cover art.
right? The covers are good on those. But it's also there's an article that came out that said that there's a very concerning trend in teens and sex and things that are happening because of misinformation and them just not being informed when it comes to their own bodies and having intimate relationships with other people. And I think that banning these books, that not giving your kids literature that might help them and inform them about positive romantic relationships and positive intimate relationships, if you are unwilling to have those conversations, is leading to them going out into the world and not understanding what they're engaging in and possibly putting themselves in very harmful situations, both emotionally and physically.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's, I think back to J.D. Salinger, Catcher in the Rye, and the fact that that book was used as sort of motivation for what was it? Who
There was
killed?
a
It was a JFK. Was it? Wasn't it? Not
Yeah, it was
JFK. It was
JFK, and then there was I covered a young actress. I can't remember who it was in this moment in time, but I covered a young actress who had been murdered, and they found that book with
yeah.
her murderer's belongings. It kind of became like a little weird playbook for very mentally unwell individuals. But JD Salinger, as we have found, was not a very well adjusted individual.
There's a PBS documentary on JD Salinger that I watched years ago that I thought was really brilliant. But as a counterpoint to that, I read Joyce Maynard's
Mm-hmm.
book about her relationship
You
with
had me
JD
read that, yeah.
Salinger. I had you read it. And yeah, and that's interesting too because what is it called? I don't want to just say the title or the author's name. But she released that at one point and she was really, really criticized for it. They blamed her. This is pre-Me Too, obviously, and
Mm.
they just accused her of wanting to um, chase his fame and glob onto him. And it's like, what? And she, yeah. And I think when I got the book, it was the second releasing under better
Mm-hmm.
circumstances for her. There was more, um,
Support for her
yeah, support and
situation,
there
yeah.
was some light on it. And I thought her writing was incredible. She also wrote, Labor Day,
Mm-hmm.
the book Labor Day, which was a movie, another movie adaptation with Kate Winslet and Josh Brolin.
Well, that's what I was gonna.
Very good.
I think that it's just like ratings. I find like they don't really rate movies anymore, at least like on streaming services, which I find interesting. But I remember going to see Titanic, which with its PG-13 rating, was it PG-13 or 14A?
I don't know. Just as a quick aside, the book is called At Home in the World. It's a memoir, Joyce Maynard.
Mm,
Um, PG-13.
it was PG-13, which it said the rating was PG-13 for disaster related peril. Why did you open up when I didn't ask you? Disaster related peril and violence, nudity, sensuality, and brief language. And I remember getting up on my tiptoes and saying, I'm 13. I was 12. And I went and I saw it 3 times in the movie theater, but the first time I saw it being scandalized by Kate Winslet being topless in it because
Really?
PG-13, like I feel like didn't really have that level of nudity.
Right.
And I think like it's so subjective. And who was it? Was it Knocked Up? It was one of those movies where they were getting hit with an 18A rating, which basically is movie death, getting an 18A rating. And so they had removed some scenes in order to get an R rating
Right.
because you can't go into a movie theater, an 18A movie, unless you are 18 or older. Like at least with an R movie, you can go in with a chaperone or a guardian or whatever. We went
Right.
to a rated R movie and I looked so young that my husband Nate had to be my guardian.
Oh
And
my
he's a year younger
gosh.
than me.
You
And they weren't
do
gonna let me
have
in.
the eternal youth something. You've had a drink of it or
No,
you've got your
a
own
man
fountain
on the
and
internet said it's because I'm so immature.
oh,
Yeah,
oh, well,
that's
a man on
why.
the internet said
Yeah,
it.
they know
Well, wow.
everything.
Well, I'll take your Titanic and I'll raise you a Braveheart.
Oh,
I That came out in 95, so I would have been like 11.
mm-hmm,
And I remember seeing the preview for that. This is the old VHS days. And I remember seeing the big theatrical trailer. Remember with that great booming male voice that
mm-hmm.
just drove those trailers home?
In a land of timeless beauty, William Wallace was a man of peace.
I want to stay here with you.
And I with you.
And I just turned to my mom and I said, I have to see this movie. And she said, okay. And she'd never let me watch R-rated movies before. But I remember getting the VHS. It was a double stack.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was very long. And I watched it in my basement and I remember it absolutely traumatized me because that had sex, that
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of violence and very, very gory, like, when he gets
Mm-hmm.
basically disemboweled. But the most traumatic part was his first love and wife and how she was killed and the circumstances there. I still cry when I think about it. It is one of the worst deaths. Like, it's just, oh God, the goddamn British, let me tell you. Anyway, that movie is kind of ruined now that it's because of Mel Gibson, but it was a big deal at the time. I mean, he directed it, starred in it. I remember like it just sweeping everything
Mm-hmm.
and being a bit of a
You have
phenomenon.
disgraced my family. Yeah.
But it traumatized me. So that I feel like I probably could have waited, but I couldn't, like my heart couldn't wait. So it's like,
It was a huge deal and it
yeah,
was
like,
everywhere
and
when
my
we were
mom
kids.
saw it in my face. She was like, she
What
needs
have
to
I
see
done?
this.
No.
I told you I was obsessed with, I am still, but history for me, like anything that was like based on,
Didn't your mom
you
also
know,
take you to see Blade?
yeah, I mean, I was in high school. No, I asked her, I was like, I have to see Blade. And yeah, that was rated R too. And that became my favorite movie of all time. Um, and I was able to quote it. Like I had the book. It was a problem. Um, but my poor mother, she didn't know anything about it. And I just love Marvel and everything. And I was like, please, please, please take me. It's like, I have to see this. She took me in the infamous rave scene where blood pours out of the sprinkler system instead of water, and they're just dancing and raving in it and drinking it. And my mom, I think, almost was so close to throwing up in the aisle of the theater. And she was like, "What is this?" I'm like, "They're vampires." I just was like, I thought she was gonna take me out of there, but again, she just knew
Vampires.
that I needed to see it, and that she did get worried. She was worried for me with that because I watched it so many times, and she'd come home and I'd be watching it and quoting it, and she was like, "It's enough. This is an obsession
Well, I
now."
mean, there are three of you, so the likelihood of one of you being a serial killer was potentially high.
I wonder how the youngest fares in that department. Um, Yeah, but luckily not a serial killer, just really into Marvel and superheroes and all that stuff. But yeah, I was exposed to some pretty like weird, like
Well,
intense stuff.
when I was 7, I saw Misery for the first time because my aunt loved a horror movie and thought, like, why not? I also watched
Yeah.
Silence of the Lambs. But when I was in
Oh
grade,
God.
yeah, when I was like a child, she was like, that's okay, Megan can watch that. But I remember being in grade 8 humanities, and we had this teacher, Mr. Deal. That is his actual name. This man deserves to be named because he was out of his damn mind. He would go on job interviews. He wanted to be a lawyer, so he was like interviewing for law school and stuff, and would just leave us in the classroom. But he decided he was going to put Rob Roy on for us as
Oh
our movie. He wheeled the
my
TV in, and you get so stoked.
God.
I don't think he knew what he was showing us. For people who don't know, Rob Roy is rated R, and we got to the scene where they're at the tree and
Jessica
he's
Lange?
sitting in this the tree and she gets on top of him, and this idiot thought that fast forwarding would make it better.
Oh my God. No.
She just went harder. And
Oh
we're
my
all sitting
God.
there absolutely shocked. And he's like yelling at us not to look while fast forwarding through the scene. And it's the most aggressive that I've
Yeah,
ever
too
seen in
late
this film.
now, pal.
Yeah.
That was also devastating. Remember when Jessica Lange follows Rob Roy's like right-hand man into the water and she's like, "You can't tell him. You can't tell him." Oh God, just too much. That's
All I
also
remember is the fast forwarding
yeah,
the
that's
kills.
well, that's a seminal moment in your life. I mean,
And
you
little
can't
did I
get
know I
past
would
it.
move into a high rise downtown and just get to see the similar actions happening in the building across from me
Oh
far too often.
God, exhibitionists.
Neither
Um,
situation did I consent to.
Well, there's a couple other ones that are, I mean, there's so many.
There's a
Please,
lot, which is scary, but yeah.
yeah, really take a look at those lists, support local bookstores. I mean, one of the books that people are buying en masse in the States is the Constitution, because it's been removed from the Oh my God, the White
Like the
House's
White's
website?
website? Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, but even like normal people, Sally Rooney had
Hmm.
some issues. So on because the Booker Prize website has like a list of some banning and challenges of books that have won their prize. And Sally Rooney's Normal People said it became a casualty of newly enacted legislation in Walton County, Florida, when it found itself on a list of 58 titles targeted for removal from its public school libraries in 2022. Many of the books on the list shared commonalities inclusive of sexual scenes, LGBTQ characters, or freedom of expression around gender. Yeah. And
That
let's
seems
see
to be a
here.
constant in a lot of these in
Yeah.
America.
Yeah, Normal People has since faced a similar fate in Orange County, Florida in January 2024, alongside 700 other books removed from schools due to perceived violations of the state's new laws banning materials with sexual conduct. So there you go.
The
Also,
Perks of Being a Wallflower.
yes, which I
Same fate has been
loved.
like every year, like since 2003, somebody has
Yeah,
challenged it or banned it.
ridiculous.
Which is
Such
it's
a
a
great
phenomenal.
book.
The film adaptation's
Yeah,
phenomenal. It does have my
yeah.
doppelganger Mae Whitman in it. Somebody the other day was
Oh,
like, "You look like Mary Elizabeth from Perks of Being a Wallflower," and I was like, "I will take a Mae Whitman compliment any day of the
I
week." Amy
love
knows
Mae
that.
Whitman. Oh my God, she's the best. Um, This comes as no surprise. Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale.
Mm, I feel like that should be banned just because people are using it as a guidebook these
Well,
days.
exactly. It's like, come
Also,
on.
Margaret Atwood was found to be kind of a terrible person, so
Hmm.
we don't really claim her anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you told I just can't keep up with these revelations of
Hmm.
Alice Munro, and I just like can't. Anyway, there's those, and then there is going back to my notes here, a book that I'm embarrassed to say that I have never read, but I definitely will read it, which is Octavia Butler's The Parable of the Sower.
That's the one where people were saying that she predicted the fires in LA, right?
Yeah, so the character, the protagonist is in Pasadena, and then what is it,
Altadena.
Pasadena, Altadena, forest fires, and basically a president that uses the slogan "Make America Great Again," post-apocalyptic world.
Oh, that her apparently the footstone at her grave has a quote from the parable of the sower, which is all that you touch, you change, all that you change changes you. That's
Yeah.
yeah,
Octavia is an absolute genius.
and apparently a prophet.
Well, this is the quote I was gonna say, if I can find it. So when asked about how she can predict the future, she said, it's not about like she can't predict the future. She goes, I didn't make up the problems. All I did was look around at the problems we're neglecting now and gave them about 30 years to grow into full-fledged disasters.
Of history, she wrote, is filled with repeating cycles of strength and weakness, wisdom and stupidity, empire and ashes. To study history is to study humanity. And she is
Yep.
very on the nose with that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. So let's all read that one. Let's put that on our
Mm-hmm.
cult list as well.
Along with Lady Chatterley's lover.
Yeah.
Quite a diverse
What is
list we have
yours? Yeah,
going in the cult.
exactly. Well,
I
that's all
think we
I
need to
got.
do a cheery one next week.
Yeah, we do.
We do. We need to lift this up.
So we should talk about Disney or something.
We should. We should talk about Disney, my favorite place.
That's right.
After I escaped the fires of the Hollywood Hills
Oh
while
my
I watched the
gosh.
Palisades in Altadena burn. Yeah.
See, we're going back into it's so easy.
So I guess Amy and I will try to find a cheerier topic to bring you in the coming weeks. I know that we could all use probably a little bit of relief from what is
Yes.
going on so far this year that has already felt like the longest year in the history of all the years. But we
Yeah.
hope that you are doing well, and we hope that you are taking care of yourselves and that you're taking time to find little pockets of joy where you can, and that you know that that is okay. If you have the ability to find joy and you have the ability to find time for yourself and to do things that make you happy, that that is okay. Please do that. Watch your favorite movies, have a treat. Know that
Pick
we're
up a
here for
banned
you.
book.
Yeah, pick up a banned book. Read Lady Chatterley's Lover. Let us know what you think. And know that we are thinking of you and that we are here for you and that we appreciate you and that we are glad that you take the time to hang out with us every 2 weeks, sometimes on
And
Fridays.
and if you have read Lady Chatterley's Lover or about to, put a little spice meter in the comments. Let me know what we're dealing with. I'd
Mm-hmm.
love to know if it's as obscene as it's been made out to be.
Like, is it 2025 obscene or is it Victorian ankle bearing obscene?
How many chili peppers
Let
is
us know.
this is this book?
Well, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Until then, stay safe.
Check your candy, or in my case, Ricola.
And may the cult
Be with you.